Vive Montréal, vive le Québec libre. These are the words of Charles de Gaulle at the Montreal Expo of 1967, fanning the flames of the growing separatist movement in Quebec. Suspicion regarding Confederation had never disappeared among French Canadians. Increased Anglophone immigration and the dominance of English in job settings and their lack of opportunity in education and income increased worries about the state of francophones in Quebec. The anti-colonial ideas of Frantz Fanon were adapted to a nationalist framework, for some justifying violence as a means for obtaining autonomy. While many believed this could be done peacefully, the Marxist Front de Libération du Québec set off their first bomb on April 21st, 1963, culminating in the October Crisis of 1970. In this unprecedented event, the FLQ's terrorist activity demonstrated the extent to which the government perceived the separatist movement as a threat, defining the government's counter-terrorist response for years to come. It all began when the FLQ kidnapped British Trade Commissioner James Cross, pictured on the left. From the government, they requested for ransom the release of 23 so-called political prisoners and the media publication of their manifesto, which was done. This was followed by another kidnapping of provincial cabinet minister Pierre Laporte, who they subsequently murdered. Despite this activity, they had many supporters among university students and leftists, of which 3,000 gathered in support of them. Because of this support, the government saw a threat in the FLQ, though they did not know the extent of the group's activities at the time. There is evidence that the people did not approve of the FLQ. Noted separatists expressed their opposition. For example, René Lévesque, leader of the Parti Québécois, condemned the group's kidnappings, extortion, and murder. However, while they were condemned, journalists and media were sympathetic to their views. The newspaper Québec Presse outwardly supported the FLQ, publishing their manifesto months before the crisis and refusing to condemn the murder of Laporte, as other sources did. Other less sympathetic sources were still cooperative by publishing the manifesto and sensationalizing the crisis through extensive coverage. Contrary to popular belief, Trudeau's implementation of the War Measures Act was more likely a choice made under pressure, his last possible option. In the approach of H.D. Munro, one needs to consider that during times of crisis, rational thinking cannot be fully implemented. Quebec politicians, notably Jean Marchand, influenced the government's choice as they or their families could have been abducted by the FLQ as easily as Pierre Laporte. The approach that sees Trudeau as rational erases the psychological aspects of decision-making as well as the role of other government officials in this choice. In fact, the controversial detention of approximately 500 people in the province was not what was intended by Trudeau's cabinet, but was accomplished by the Montreal police and the RCMP, who were not capable of distinguishing legitimate threats from innocent people. In fact, Trudeau instructed his peers to remove any names they felt inappropriate from the lists. This decision, made in a time of uncertainty and high emotion, is glorified today, attributed only to Pierre Trudeau with the bold words, "Well, just watch me." Even when the crisis was over, the government continued to see separatists as a threat, often without reason. The RCMP acted illegally against them as they opened people's mail, distributed false communiques, and raided the offices of the Parti Québécois to steal membership lists. While some argue that the War Measures Act was an isolated event and that the act was replaced by the Emergencies Act in 1988, which prevents human rights violations such as censorship and arbitrary search and seizure. However, the Emergencies Act can still suspend habeas corpus and thus subject people to arbitrary arrest and detention, as pictured here. In the aftermath of the October crisis, the nationalist cause of the Parti Québécois was not hurt, and they were victorious in the 1976 provincial elections. A man was murdered, and the fear of the recurrence of domestic terrorism remained in the minds of government officials. However, to this day, Quebec's long-standing nationalism remains alive, and a portion of Québécois people seek independence, with political parties advocating for the cause on provincial and federal levels.